Our next guest from Washington, D.C., the Deputy General Counsel for the Environmental Protection Agency, Ethan Shenkam.
Great, thanks for having me. Why is the guy from EPA here, right? Why am I on the agenda? Well, I want to talk about the future. We've heard a lot of talk about the future this morning. I want to talk about the future of our planet. And I'm told I have 15 minutes to do so. I'm also told I'm the only thing that's standing between you and lunch, so I'm highly motivated here. But I want to talk about the biggest challenge facing our planet today, that's climate change. And I want to talk about your role in meeting that challenge as innovators, but also your opportunities in the information and communications technology sector. So I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change. I'm going to talk about some regulatory initiatives that are on the horizon that are important for you to know about and for your companies to know about, particularly in the power sector. I'm going to talk about the role of energy efficiency and the critical role of technology and innovation in getting us where we need to be. Climate change is real. Climate change is happening already. We know that. A few statistics. 2014 was the hottest year on record globally. From 2001 to 2012, we had the warmest temperatures of any previous decade in every region of the United States. And globally, the 10 warmest years on record have all occurred since 1998. We know what's happening, and we know it's coming at an enormous cost to our environment, to our health, to our most vulnerable communities who are least able to protect themselves from this change, and to our economy. One statistic, in 2012 alone, climate and weather-related disasters cost the American economy more than $100 billion. And of course, it's not all due to climate change, but the fact that climate change is happening and it's exacerbating these weather events is a major problem. These are some of the indicators, all of which uniformly indicate that climate change is happening and that it's real. We also have a consensus in the scientific community that human activity is largely responsible for climate change. Climate change is the result of emissions of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, pollution, emissions of carbon dioxide is the biggest source of greenhouse gases. And if you look at sectors of our economy, some of the most significant are obviously industry, transportation, but the one I want to talk about most today is the electricity sector, the sector that generates power through the burning primarily through the burning of fossil fuels. In June of 2013, President Obama put out a climate action plan, and it had 3 key pillars. The first was to cut carbon pollution here in the United States, which is what I'm going to focus on. Also, second, to prepare the United States for the effects of climate change that we're seeing already, so that communities can adapt to the changes that we're witnessing and become more resilient. And third, for the United States to be a leader in international efforts. It's a global problem, it requires a global solution, and you may know that coming up in December, there's a very big UN climate negotiation happening in Paris. With respect to the first of those pillars, cutting carbon pollution in the United States, there are 5 components of that effort. The first is clean energy, which I'm going to focus on today, but also second, our transportation sector is incredibly important, bringing us to a 21st century transportation world. Third, cutting energy waste. Fourth, reducing other greenhouse gas emissions like methane. And 5, leading by example within the federal family. So what's EPA's role in achieving the President's Climate Action Plan? Well, we've spent a lot of time, we've been very, very busy, and we've spent a lot of time focusing on the transportation sector, focusing on mobile sources of greenhouse gases. And just to pick one example of what we've been able to accomplish over the last several years, we have established the toughest fuel economy standards in US history for cars and trucks, which will double average fuel efficiency from 27 to 54 miles per gallon by the year 2025. So we've made enormous strides with mobile sources of greenhouse gases. We're also looking at methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. But the big thing I want to talk about today is an initiative to address carbon emissions from power plants, which, as I noted before, is the largest single concentrated source of greenhouse gases in the United States. And we have a proposed rule both for new power plants and a proposed rule for existing power plants. Before we get to the details of that proposal, I just wanted to share this slide. It's one of my favorite slides that I get to show. It's about the Clean Air Act and how it's really been an incredible success story over the past 3 or 4 decades. And you can just look at the top line and the bottom line to see why. There's a lot of discussion out there in the world about how we have to choose between environmental protection and growing our economy. We have to choose between environmental protection and job growth. But I think history tells us that that's a false choice. That's a false dichotomy. We can have both. We have had both. Since 1970, our gross domestic product has more than tripled in size. And if you look at that bottom number, for the 6 most common pollutants like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, the things that create smog, lead, and so forth, we have seen a 70% decrease in air pollution during this same time period while our economy has seen unprecedented growth. So we can do both, and the Clean Air Act has been quite a success story. But what I want to talk to you today is how we are now using the Clean Air Act to address carbon emissions. This is something that's relatively new. It's not one of those conventional pollutants that were listed in the last graph. This is the type of air pollution that's contributing to global warming and climate change. And the big thing that we've been working on, or one of the biggest things that we've been working on that I want to highlight for you because I think it's really relevant to your sector, is our proposed Clean Power Plan. This is the plan that we put out in June of 2014 in proposed form, and its goal is to cut carbon pollution from the electricity sector by 30% by the year 2030. Along the way, it will also result in the elimination of hundreds of thousands of tons of harmful particle pollution, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides as a co-benefit, the conventional pollution that I talked about. And this will lead to, we estimate, health and climate benefits worth an estimated $55 to $93 billion by the year 2030. So how did we put this proposed Clean Power Plan together? Well, the short of it is, we looked out to the world to see what was happening in the world. We looked out to see what was happening in industry, what was happening with consumers, what was happening with states. We looked at, for example, 10 states that already have market-based greenhouse gas emission programs, 38 states that have renewable energy portfolio standards, 47 states that have utilities that run demand-side energy efficiency programs, which I'm going to talk a little more about, and 27 states that have their own energy efficiency standards or goals. And we took what's already happening, the trends that we're already seeing, the investments that are already being made, and we drew from those examples to create a national plan for the power sector. As I said before, this was put out in proposed form in June of 2014. It was put out for comment. It's received a little bit of attention. We have received 4.3 million comments on our proposal, because that is, I think that reflects how deeply this impacts our economy and our society. So how does this work? Just a real short, very simple explanation of how the proposed Clean Power Plan is structured. What we did is we proposed at the federal level goals for each of the 50 states, and then leave it to the states to decide how to realize those goals. The goals are expressed in a ratio of carbon pollution to power, so tons of carbon dioxide emitted per megawatt hour. How did we determine, or how did we propose those goals? for each of the 50 states? Well, we looked at the 4 main strategies that are out there already. States and businesses and others are already using these strategies to make our power sector more efficient. We looked at 4 main strategies. First, we looked at how power plants themselves are becoming more efficient by reducing the heat rate of their boilers. Second, we looked at how there's been a greater transfer of reliance from coal to natural gas. Natural gas is not a purely clean form of energy production, but it's cleaner than coal. There's been a shift from coal to gas, and so that's a second strategy that we looked at. Third is moving not just from high generating emission sources to low generating emission sources, but moving from high generating emission sources to zero emission sources. And by zero emission sources, I mean primarily renewable energy, wind and solar primarily, but other kinds of renewables as well. So that's the third strategy, is moving to a larger percentage of renewables. And the fourth is demand-side energy efficiency, something that we're seeing utilities take advantage of all around the country, seeing states take advantage of all around the country. And the way that we think about demand-side energy efficiency programs is that it enables consumers to receive the same services, but through a cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient process. By applying these 4 strategies to a certain baseline where states were in 2012, we projected out the goals that states could meet by the year 2030. And those goals for each state have been put out for public comment. So the next steps are sometime this summer, we plan to finalize this rule, finalize the state goals, and then the states will have between 1 and 3 years, well that's what we had in our proposal, depending on whether they get certain kinds of extensions, to prepare plans that will specify how their states will meet the goals. And the states have an incredible amount of flexibility. They can adopt the 4 strategies that I just discussed. They can adopt some of them, but not all of them. They could use other strategies. They can do them. They can tailor this to what makes the most sense for their states. They can also band together with other states and form regional solutions. For states that don't submit plans, or that submit plans that don't meet federal requirements, EPA has the ability to step in and issue a federal plan for that state. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for the information and communications technology sector? Well, you already know this, and we've heard a lot of talk about it this morning, that the information and communications technology sector, ICT, has been one of the most transformative sectors in the world in many, many respects, but including in increasing our efficiency and our energy efficiency, and therefore in lowering our carbon footprint. And there's one particular group that you may be familiar with, GESI, the Global E-Sustainability Initiative, GESI, which has put out a series of reports looking at the ICT sector and what it has done to reduce the carbon footprint, but also what it can do in the future. And its most recent report was called Smarter 2020. And it talked about a couple of things. First of all, it talked about how ICT businesses are themselves significant energy consumers. And it estimated that in 2011, the ICT industry accounted for approximately 3% of US carbon emissions, but that's growing significantly with data centers and so on. And so one way that it's relevant is that a lot of ICT companies are looking at how they can reduce their carbon footprint, how they can derive their energy needs from cleaner and greener sources of energy, how they can become more energy efficient. But in addition, GESI talks about how the ICT sector, through innovation, through technology, through developments in software and so forth, have enabled other sectors in the economy to be more efficient, to reduce their carbon footprints, and to increase their energy efficiency. And I mean, GESI is just one organization, but their estimate is that there's the potential for this sector worldwide to reduce global carbon emissions by 16.5% by the year 2020. That was their estimate. I'm not here to necessarily endorse it or say that it's correct, but I want to bring it to your attention. It's one of the leading groups in your area that are focused on this. And so, can you still hear me? Yeah. And Gessie talks about the potential for ICT to help, as I said, other sectors of the economy become more energy efficient. The power sector, the building sector, the transportation sector, agriculture and land use, consumer services. And so there are at least 3 ways that this effort to increase the efficiency of our power sector is relevant to your industry. The first is there will be an increased interest in energy efficiency and reducing the carbon footprint of all sectors. And so there's your own carbon footprint to be thinking about. Second, innovation in the power sector. Under EPA's proposal, it's the power sector that's going to be very, very focused on becoming more efficient and transforming to a low carbon economy. And through technologies such as smart grids, the use of real-time data to make energy decisions based on consumer and supplier behavior, and technological solutions to help facilitate the integration of renewable energy into our grid. Things like that are going to become more and more important, and there's going to be more and more demand for those kinds of solutions. And third, as states and others look to develop demand-side energy plans to meet their goals, there's going to be an increased interest. There already is an interest, but there's going to be an even more increased interest in technological solutions to help increase energy efficiency across the board in all sectors. So as the President said in his 2013 Climate Action Plan, our scientists will design new fuels, our farmers will grow them, our engineers will devise new sources of our energy, our workers will build them, and our businesses will sell them. All of us need to do our part. I don't want to end without giving a little bit of a shout out to some of the programs at EPA that you may be familiar with that are based on voluntary initiatives across the economy, but in the ICT sector particularly. Energy Star is one of the ones that's most well known. I think we have a study that says 8 out of 10 Americans recognizes the Energy Star emblem. We have 1,600 Energy Star partners. Over the last 2 decades, the Energy Star program has helped save over $300 billion on our utility bills. At the same time, slashing more than 2.5 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency. Some of our most significant partners are in the ICT area. One of our 2014 Partners of the Year was Verizon, but there's a whole slew of telecom companies who participate in that program. We have something called the Top 30 Tech and Telecom program, which also it produces a ranking and gives awards to companies in this sector who are pledging to derive more of their energy needs from greener and cleaner sources of energy. And some of those companies, the top 7 that just came out this year include Intel, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Cisco, Dell, Sprint, EMC Corporation, SAP, and Rackspace US. That's the top 10, actually. So there's a lot of participation in that program. And we also have something called the Climate Leadership Awards. Sprint was one of the companies that won one of the big excellence awards in this area. So there's a lot of opportunity for companies in your sector to exercise leadership, and there's going to be an increased demand for the types of technological and innovative solutions that you can provide as states, the power sector, and everyone across our country is looking for more energy efficiency solutions. So in sum, climate change is not just a moral challenge, it's an economic opportunity that we can seize. It will enable us to unleash investment and innovation in a cleaner, more efficient economy that will help lead us to what inevitably will become a lower carbon economy in the United States. So with that, thank you very much.